model to what we do with our abattoir, because we have local farmers who, whether it's small animals such as goats and sheep or cattle, they grow and then they take it to the abattoir, where we have the necessary controls, the health controls, etc., the necessary checks and balances to ensure that the product that the public finally gets for consumption is of the very best quality. And so that's the same model that we will be employing with our poultry industry. I want to thank AICA, who has made an expert available to us to assist us in this. I want to thank the Taiwanese for always being there, and they have stepped up in a significant way, because I am told by the experts that there is no poultry industry unless you have what they call a hatchery. There has to be a business, if you will, where the chickens emerge, or what creates the chickens, and those chickens are then sold to the farmers who actually will raise those chickens to the point where they then can be processed for chicken parts. And so the hatchery, we're told, is going to be on St. Kitts with the assistance of the Taiwanese, and we're very grateful for that. And so rather than having to bring birds from Barbados or someplace else, we can now have birds being hatched locally and made available to local farmers. We feel that there's also room for private sector involvement in the hatchery side of this business. And if you see it as a conveyor belt, if you see it as a conveyor line, if you will, you have the hatchery. That's a business in itself. That then feeds the farmers. The farmers are businesses. The farmers then grow the chicks and they feed it to the abattoir. Not the abattoir, the chicken processing facility. And then that facility then puts that chicken out. And I'm hopeful, ladies and gentlemen, very hopeful, that in the next several months we should have fresh organic chicken, locally produced, available on supermarket shelves throughout Nevis and the wider Federation. That is a significant part of our economic diversification thrust. And I will just add that we just had the music festival on St. Kitts. And of course, whenever there are these big events in St. Kitts and Nevis, all of our people from both of our islands respond. And so the music festival in St. Kitts saw thousands of people from Nevis traveling to St. Kitts for that festival, just as we expect this weekend to see thousands of Kittitians traveling over for the Mango Fest and, of course, for Culturama when Culturama comes at the end of July. We expect to see that journey the other way when cricket comes to St. Kitts CPL and when Carnival Sugar Mass comes. And that is the way that these two islands continue to support each other. For those who doubt the numbers, I can tell you that we have had some numbers from NASPA, our Nevis ANC Ports Authority. NASPA controls the port at Wally, the water taxi port. They also control the main passenger port in Charlestown. NASPA has indicated to us that over the, what they call in the Music Fest and White Sand weekend, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, those 4 days, from Thursday, June 22nd to Sunday, June 25th, we had 8,353 passenger movements between St. Kitts and Nevis over that weekend. 8,353. For a similar period in 2022, we had 8,089. And so we had almost 300 additional persons moving this year over that weekend. And to put it in context for the press, on a normal weekend, when there's no activity, we have movements of about 4,800 passengers. So this weekend then we saw a near doubling of the movement on that weekend. And so that I think is significant. Now I also want to add that this did not capture persons like myself because I went over on the sea bridge. So it doesn't capture the sea bridge. It doesn't capture persons who would have traveled using private boats. And so it is significant that these numbers are perhaps still higher in terms of the number of persons going back and forth. These are only NASPA's numbers from the two ports that NASPA controls. And for many who doubted and even criticized the investment in the water taxi pier that this government would have made, I believe that the numbers again show that the water taxi facility continues to perform. Of those 8,353 movements, we had 2,430 arrivals and 2,767 departures from the water taxi facility. That's 767,430. That's about 1,200, 5,000 or so, 200 of those 8,000 plus went via the water taxi facility. And the balance went via the port in Charlestown. We see now on average the water taxi facility almost doubling the traffic that we get in Charlestown. And so again, the investment made absolute good sense. It has become a major point. It has revolutionized travel between these two islands, and people now have that ease of going back and forth between St. Kitts and Nevis. And that industry and the investment that we made in that industry and supporting the infrastructure for that industry is still currently 100% Nivision owned and operated. Of course, we expect in time that other operators will get in, but for now, all of the ferry operators from the water taxi facility are based here on the island of Nevis. And so it was a win-win-win situation. Some may say a no-brainer. And that is why I say, despite the noise and despite the criticisms, we persevered and put that facility there. And I think that it is now paying dividends. I have, ladies and gentlemen, one last thing to say, and that is on the issue of crime, because, of course, there can be no development in an era or in a community where there is insecurity. And we have been working very closely with the police here on the island of Nevis, Division C, and I want to commend them. They're now being led by Inspector Carty, who has taken up the mantle since the former leader of Division C has now been elevated to the post of Commissioner of Police. And so these statistics show that for the first 6 months of this year, we have had 61 reported crimes, what we refer to as major crimes, and that compares unfavorably with last year, the same 6-month period, when we had 58. So we have had 3 more criminal activities reported this year for the first 6 months than we did last year in 2022. Of note is that the most heinous of crimes, which is murder, in the period for last year, we would have had 2. One in the first half of the year and one late in the second half of the year. And this year thus far, we've had 2 in the first half of this year. And so we are hopeful that we have no more loss of life, and that the youngsters who might be listening to me continue to operate and conduct themselves properly, so that we put away the guns and we put away all efforts and attempts at violence. Crime really doesn't pay. I know people say it and some doubt it, but it really doesn't pay. And I tell people, no matter how successful you think the robbery was, no matter how successful you think the drugs that you sold might have been, no matter how successful you think the last thing that you committed, the house breaking that you committed might have been, crime ultimately lands us in one of 2 places. It's either the cemetery, and I gather that there's room at Springfield and there's room here at Britannic. So if that's where you want to go, a life of crime will take you there. Or it lands you at 1640, it's called in St. Kitts? 1840. See, I'm going back 200 years. It takes you to 1840 in St. Kitts. Either way, 1640 or 1840, that's not where you want to be. There's work available. I've pointed out that the economy is growing. We are recovering. And so I'm urging our young people to go out and do things the right way. You want money? Go and earn money. Go and work. Find a job. Sleep better at nights. Understanding that what you're doing is legitimate. And so I will leave it there, members of the press, and invite any comments that you might have. Just before you do, I remember the last occasion, Von Radio had some questions for me. One such question was about the peace program, whether it still exists. The answer is, of course, yes. And they also asked about the numbers. I'm told that we had as high as 130 youngsters in Nevis on that peace program. We're now down to about 70. And that's due to a variety of factors, but we currently have about 70 persons. They're paid on average $400 a week, and the supervisors are paid $750 a week. So I now invite your questions and hope that Vaughn would have noted the answers. Came a month later, but nevertheless, the answers to the question that they would have posed.
Good afternoon, Premier.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bart. Welcome to Nevis.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes.
Officially, Glenn Bart, SK Newsline. Now, Mr. Premier, the last time you met with the Prime Minister, officially, sort of, was in the United Kingdom during the coronation period.
Yes.
And, but a year since the talk about establishing this task force to examine the relationship between Nevis and St. Kitts, and the financial arrangements and other types of arrangements, there seems to be lots of delays or slow progress. My question is this: do you at this time feel assured that the financial arrangements between the federal government and the NIA will be better than it was on the Team Unity? And is the task force active? And have you been and if it is not active, have you been told why it is not active as yet? Secondly, with regards to Culturama, is there a way that you can determine the level of visitor arrivals into Nevis specifically as a result of Culturama? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Bart, you asked some very good questions. The last question, let me try and address that first. Statistics has been a very difficult area for us in context of tourism generally. Nevis, as you know, is heavily dependent currently on the ports in St. Kitts for persons coming through, particularly persons coming by air. And most of our guests are coming through at the RLB, the Robert Llewellyn Battery Airport. The problem is that other than guests saying on the forms that we have where they intend to stay, it really doesn't tell you very much more in terms of what they're there for, whether it's Culturama, whether it's Carnival, whether it's music festival, as the case may be. Now, I will tell you that there's a genuine debate as to how much information you extract from your guests. All of us who would have traveled know that one of the most annoying aspects to travel is filling out these forms. I certainly don't like to do it, and I'm pretty sure that I speak for many. And I have seen some forms which look like mini questionnaires. Age, area where you're from, why your reason for visiting, and that kind of thing. Income bracket, all kinds of things. Now, that's good if you get persons willing to fill out the information. It gives you some data that you can look at. But I think for many, it is seen as something that detracts from your holiday experience. You're going on holiday, you don't have no time with no long form. In fact, if you go to the UK used to have the shortest form that I've seen in all my years of travel, when they just ask you a few questions and that's it. So that's the struggle sometimes, to determine how much information that you can get. I think what we need to do is develop a system where we get more information from the hotels, the guest houses, and the areas, the villas where people are staying. Because I think they would have perhaps a better indication as to why these guests are there, what their tastes are, where they visit while they're there, etc. That might be a better option for us. But I will tell you, Mr. Bart, that the collection of data has been one of the difficulties that we have experienced, especially here in Nevis. In fact, some years ago, we actually used to send a staff member from the Ministry of Tourism in Nevis to St. Kitts, to RLB, just to collect those bits of paper from the boxes to see who's going to Nevis in order for us to get some idea of the numbers. So it is very difficult. In Nevis, we tend to always have what we call undercounting, because we depend exclusively on the hotels to give us the numbers, particularly since our airport here, as you know, is largely inactive insofar as people coming in are concerned. And so at RLB, they do get the data, but sometimes it's not easy to disaggregate that data. so we know who's coming to Nevis, who's coming to St. Kitts. And that is something we really need to pay some attention to. So we have a better idea of who's fueling, for example, the traffic into RLB and what percentages of that traffic. We know, for example, over the years that because of the higher cost of Nevis, insofar as hotel accommodations, we pitch ourselves at the higher end of the industry, that as a result of that, most of what they call the front of aircraft, so the business class section coming into RLB, tends to be people who are coming to Nevis. With Park Hyatt coming, that is not always the case, because you now have a comparable property on St. Kitts in Park Hyatt that is also catering to a luxury traveler. So it would be good to get inside those numbers, but I don't have that data, and that data is not ordinarily available to us currently. We had discussed some computer programming and reprogramming to allow agencies in Nevis to access that data as well. But I recall when we had that discussion, national security had some legitimate concerns, because they were saying that this really is a national security portal of persons coming in. And we know that those persons coming in, immigration, customs, etc., they would fall generally within that rubric as border control. And so they didn't want any and anybody, so to speak, to have access to the data. So it's something we need to look at. I've gone in a very loquacious way to tell you that it is not possible currently to tell you how many people specifically arrive for Culturama. We can extrapolate, we can imply, we can say, well, we have 2,000 people who showed up in July, so more than likely they came for Culturama. But there's really no litmus test that we can use to give you some level of specificity. So that is the current situation. And we have the same problem, because I'm pretty sure St. Kitts wouldn't be able to tell you how many people came specifically for Carnival, how many people came specifically for Music Festival, because we're not collecting that data as people come in. You asked about the task force. We had, of course, and I had discussed with the Prime Minister a 6-person task force. We have nominated our members to that task force. I don't know if that was the language that we used to describe it, but in any event, a committee, a group to look at this whole issue of fair share, which was a big issue in the last election, as you know. I have been fairly consistent in following up with the Prime Minister, and to his credit, he has been fairly consistent in updating me. I know, was awaiting some data from some international organizations, and so I do not have an update for you on this occasion, but I anticipate that I'll be meeting with the Honorable Prime Minister shortly, and this is one of the items on the agenda for us to make a determination as to where we're going. You asked an interesting question: will we be better off or worse off? I think I will want to answer you this way. We want to be fair. So for us, it's not about better off or worse off necessarily. We want an open, transparent process of sharing the resources of the country. And in fact, what we had proposed during the Team Unity era was a pretty fair way, because we said, let us base it on population. So you take CBI, Citizenship by Investment. If the proceeds from Citizenship by Investment 1 year was $600 million, then Nevis would get its 24%, I think it was, 25%. St. Kitts would get its 75%. If the following year those receipts fell to $300 million, Nevis will get its 25%, St. Kitts will get its 7%. We will be worse off in the year 2, because the overall amount is less, but it will be worse off proportionally to St. Kitts. What the problem we had was that we were getting $500 and $600 million coming into the country, and Nevis was getting 40 or 50 million, and St. Kitts was getting the balance. Because when we did the analysis of the revenue stream over the course of the life of the program, recall that our analysis suggested that Nevis only got 7% of the revenue from CBI, while St. Kitts got 93%. And those numbers were never refuted. Even in the height of the political to-in and fro-in, back-in and forth-in, those numbers were never refuted. We were accused of many things. We can't spend money, we're greedy, all kind of things, but the percentages were never disputed. That Sinkers was getting 93 and Nevis was getting 7. So for us, it's not really a question of are you better off or worse off. For us, it's can we have a transparent mechanism that you, Mr. Bart, every national in the country, the government can understand. And it allows us now better planning as well, because we can have forecasts and we can say, well, all right, we anticipate that this will be the revenue, just as we would anticipate each budget what our revenue is going to be, rather than a situation that currently exists where we are essentially dependent on Sinkers determining what proportion of this will Nevis get. And so these are things that we think need to be looked at. I have said it publicly before, but I have commended Prime Minister Drew because his approach thus far has been far more open and transparent than even the government that I was a part of. Imagine that. That I am now in opposition, but I'm getting greater transparency from a government to which I am in opposition than a government where I sat in cabinet as a senior minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Because whenever we ask the then government, of which I was a part, and the then Minister of Finance, what is happening with CBI? You get all kinds of twists and turns, and you never got a straight answer. I remember, Mr. Bart, that there was one occasion when there was a discussion about the Hurricane Relief Fund. You recall, after the 2017 hurricanes had devastated much of the region, we got not a direct hit, but we got some damage as well. And the Hurricane Relief Fund was put in place. And I recall that Mr. Les Kant, who was then the man in charge, he came and there was a discussion in the cabinet. And I don't want to disclose any cabinet secrets. I still believe my oath is important. But there was a discussion in the cabinet. And the question was asked of Mr. Kant, could he give an indication of the numbers for the Hurricane Relief Fund thus far? And Mr. Kant said he was doing well. Well, doing well is not a number. So yeah, but could you give the numbers? And Mr. Kant deferred to the then Prime Minister, who said, oh, it's doing all right. It is doing well. It is doing well. We never were able to get numbers. And I feel that this is a significant change. And I give you an example. Prime Minister Drew called me when he shortly got into office. And he said to me, Premier, are you aware that a particular friend of St. Kitts and Nevis makes a particular contribution to the office of the Prime Minister each year for projects? Bear in mind, Mr. Bart, I was a senior member of the Unity Administration for 7 years, sat in cabinet every Monday morning. And I said, no, the first I'm here. And Prime Minister Drew expressed surprise. Naturally, I wasn't aware of this. And he then disclosed the amount, and he indicated that going forward, Nevis will get a percentage of that amount. And I thought that that was instructive because all when we're talking about fair share during the campaign and talking about amounts, we never included those amounts coming in from donor countries because we were not aware of them. Not aware of them. These were amounts coming into the office of the Prime Minister to be used. However, the then Prime Minister decided he would use it, but Nevis was left out, way out in the cold. Way out in the cold. So this Prime Minister called me. We're not on the same side. He's the Prime Minister, Labour-led administration. I'm the leader of the opposition. And he said to me, are you aware? And he said, this is a commitment. To the point where I can say, because it is in the public domain, that we are using those funds to do the additional work that we're currently embarked upon at Pinnis Beach, at the Malcolm Gishard Recreational Park, what we call in the second phase, where we're doing parking and drainage, proper lighting, security, and all of that. That is what has made that possible. And so I have to say these things because, to me, I was in a cabinet where information was being hidden from cabinet members. And I am now in a situation with a government in opposition to them where more information is forthcoming. And I must say so because it is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And so You ask, will we be better off? Will we be worse off? I think we are already better off because there is a level of openness. There's a level of mutual respect. There's a level of dialogue that never existed. The worst thing, Mr. Bart, that anybody could have is to think that you are in a relationship, but in reality, you're not. Because who you think you're in a relationship with, spending all the time scheming against you. And that was the reality for us under Team Unity. And thank God that we have left that behind, relegated it to the scrap heap of history, and we're now moving on with new ideas, new energy, and hopefully building a new country and a new relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis. I will say one last thing. People say, oh, unity mash up because of this fair share issue. And now they say, Mr. Brantley, you're not talking about it as much. It's a fair comment. But there's a fundamental difference in terms of the factual matrix. And here it is. Prime Minister Drew and Labour never promised Nevis anything. They never entered into any Charleston Accord with the people of Nevis and the Concerned Citizens Movement Party. Team Unity did. I think that that point is lost on some people because three parties came together and signed the Charleston Accord. PAM, PLP, and CCM. And that Charleston Accord had certain commitments. That's the word I'm going to use. Because if you recall, Mr. Bart, when the elections of 2015 were over, PAM had 4 seats, CCM had 2 seats, and PLP only had 1 seat. We know that 6 is the required number to form a federal government. We know that because look at Labour now. They have 6 seats and they are in government. And therefore it means that PAM and CCM could have formed a government in 2015 on their own. But you know why we didn't? Because there was an agreement. And there were certain commitments that had been made that the parties had signed to. That is how Timothy Harris became Prime Minister, with 1 seat. 1 seat in 2015. Because the rest of us, to use PAM's slogan from the last convention, kept our promise. That really was the thing. And so you couldn't look and say, well, the Charleston Accord was good to elevate some and give some what they wanted, but not good for others. And so I think that the grievance that came in about fair share was that the Charleston Accord set out a framework for St. Kitts and Nevis in terms of sharing. And when that faltered, and it was clear that those who had used the very accord to be elevated to the highest offices were no longer interested in the other aspects of the accord, discord is what resulted from a failure to comply with the dictates of the accord that had been entered into. And that is where we found ourselves. And that situation was untenable. Because at the end of the day, Mr. Bard, where there's a contract for the purchase of a piece of land, purchase of a home, contract for the purchase of goods, contract between you and your wife, you and your spouse, in marriage. At the end of the day, once you find out that people are undermining you, and that the issue of trust on which you depend and the confidence which you should have in those that you're doing business with is gone, then nothing in my view is left. And that is what happened, and that is why this construct called Team Unity eventually collapsed. Not because the idea was a bad idea. I still feel it is one of the best political ideas to come out of St. Kitts and Nevis, but because the train, as beautifully designed as it was, had a bad driver. That ultimately is what derails trains, when the man who's at the helm has ambitions other than going in the right direction. You end up in confusion and problems. And so here we are. And so I credit the new Prime Minister because, in my humble opinion, thus far, he has been far more open than the Prime Minister that I sat with in the cabinet on a weekly basis, and the one that I engage with on a weekly basis, because he was very adept at hiding information, particularly financial information, from his own cabinet. Didn't want us to see, didn't want us to know, because, of course, he didn't want to fulfill the commitments under the various accords that we had entered into as political parties. Any other questions for me? We have a new journalist today.
Donella Thompson, Von Radio. Good
How are you,
afternoon.
Donella?
I'm fine,
good
thank
to
you.
see you. Uh-huh.
Thank you. I have more questions, if that's fine.
Sure.
Question number 1. As the island has been experiencing water shortages and rationing over the past months, is the recent rainfall expected to make a major difference in the water resources going forward? Question 2. With regards to the pension plan for non-established workers for the NIE, could you outline the qualifying factors and whether or not it has commenced? Question 3. In relation to the bypass road, it was announced that the necessary agreements have been signed. Is there a commencement date and or time frame for the roadwork? And question 4, can an update be provided on the hospital expansion project? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All excellent questions, Ms. Thompson, and thank you for coming and for being here. The water shortage issue, will these recent rains make a major difference? I think the short answer is no. It won't make a major difference at this point, but it will help, because one of the things that rainfall does, it means that we have less water being consumed for gardening, for the agricultural purposes, for people watering their lawns and doing all of that. Four Seasons, for example, which is a major offtake of water, the rains would help their golf course and all of that. And so I think that it helps. What we really need, however, is our aquifers to be replenished, and that would require sustained rainfall over a sustained period of time. The difficulty that we've experienced is that the region, not just Nevis or St. Kitts, but the region generally has been experiencing considerably lower levels of rainfall over the past several years. And so we would need rainfall to be back at those levels in order for us to really say that we are making progress. So we welcome the rain. I hope you would continue to pray for more rain. But would it make a major difference, single day of showers? I don't think it will. What will make a difference, in my view, is for our people to conserve water, to continue to see water as an essential resource that they should not waste. And in not wasting it, I would ask our people to report leaks, to get leaks in their homes fixed, but also to report leaks sometimes you see on the road. I walk sometimes at mornings, I'm amazed at the number of pipes I see that are burst, water everywhere, and their neighbors there, and it looks like nobody really cares. But the day you put on your tap and no water comes out, you start to call the radio station and you go on Facebook. So obviously you recognize that water has value. And so I'm asking our people to be prudent and sensible and to conserve as much water as possible. We are looking at the water rates that are currently levied on the island of Nevis. We're doing an analysis across the region now. We have realized that water rates in St. Kitts and Nevis are some of the lowest in the entire region. In fact, in St. Kitts, water rates are even lower than they are in Nevis. So I'm not sure how the St. Kitts Water Authority is being able to manage the situation over there, but it's even lower than it is in Nevis. But we're looking at that. For example, currently I think the price of water is 13 EC dollars for 1,000 gallons. And to put it in context for you, 1,000 gallons, you'll probably get a few hundred of these from 1,000 gallons. And I don't know about you, but normally when people go out, they pay $5 for this. So you're paying $5 for this, but the government is giving you 1,000 gallons of water for $13. So by the time you buy 2.5 of that, $13 is gone. But government is giving you 1,000 gallons for $13. And in fact, we're giving $13 a gallon up to 3,000 gallons. So if you got 3,000 gallons of water, you only pay $39. So maybe it is. You see the difference, for example, in electricity. Electricity is expensive. You hear people saying take off the AC, turn off the lights, because people recognize at the end of the month it's going to cost. Water now, people seem not to have the same attitude to it because they think it's cheap, so it's nothing. Water bill tends to be the lowest bill that most people in Nevis pay each month. So we have to look at that. We're going to shortly launch a massive PR campaign to deal with encouraging conservation in relation to water and water consumption. We are doing a rate analysis. We'll come back to the public with more on that. We also have identified the need for a mapping exercise to be engaged in. One was done many years ago, but we are told that better technology is available now. So we are going to use drones, I'm told, to map so that we can know with greater specificity where water can be found so that we know where to drill. We will shortly embark on a drilling campaign. We're looking to do about 7 new wells. And those, we hope, will give us anywhere from 1.5 to 2 million gallons of additional water each day. We, however, feel that in the long term, desalination has to be the solution. We are surrounded by ocean, and if we can take the salt out of that water, then we have a limitless supply of water. And so we think that's the solution. It is now not a good solution because of the high cost of electricity, because the plant runs on electricity, and the high cost of electricity would mean that the cost of the water will be too high. But we are hopeful that with the geothermal energy and the dramatic reduction in cost of energy, that we can then go to desal as a primary source and allow our aquifers an opportunity to recover, because that has been a major concern, that we're extracting water too fast from the aquifers and they're not replenishing as quickly as they should. The pension plan and who qualifies, my understanding is that you have to be in the service for at least 10 years as a non-established worker, whereafter you will qualify, and that you are required to retire at 62, and it is at that point that something kicks in. There is a formula. I confess I don't have it in my head, but I do know that we issued a flyer that went out to public servants, and I would ask you to check with the PS who's here. He heads the committee that has dealt with this matter for us, PS Daniel, that he can supply that flyer to you, so you could have it in the newsroom and have it readily available to you in terms of what the formula looks like. If you have not done 10 years, I think you get a lump sum payment when you leave, but you won't get a monthly sum. But if you've done 10 years, you get a monthly sum. Now, this is for non-established workers. These are for those who hitherto would not have got a pension because they were not part of the establishments as it's referred to. But many of them would have worked for 40 years, 50 years sometimes, and then leave, as we say colloquially, with their 2 long hands. And so we have sought to change it, and I feel very proud. I don't think it has really got the level of coverage that it should have, but it is one of the most significant achievements of any government that we have had here in this island in a very long time. I think many times we talk about the road and the buildings, and that's important too, don't get me wrong. But I think this is significant in bringing real relief to a lot of families who saw themselves. And one of the things that we saw is that sometimes people were 65, even 70, and they didn't want to go home. And what do you mean? You need to retire. But in part, they didn't want to go home because they needed that income in order to survive. And so this at least gives them a little bit of assistance. So we are hopeful that with the pension from this scheme, plus whatever they will get from Social Security, that they'll be able to live a bit more comfortably. And I'm proud that this government said we will deliver it, and we have delivered it thus far. The bypass road, the last report we got from Minister Brand, who's the responsible minister, is that we should see some movement next week. So we are hopeful that by next week we should see the movement on the bypass road in terms of the construction. We know that there have been some meetings with the stakeholders, NEVLEC, Water Department, and Surrey Paving, which has been awarded the contract to do that road. And while we say the bypass road, I want to make it very clear, Ms. Thompson, that it goes all the way to the Water Department, where they have the barbecue, on the pump road. So we say bypass road, but it actually goes from right here below us in Pinnies all the way around to the Water Department barbecue, that area. So it encompasses the pump road, Stuart Williams Drive, and the bypass. So that is the whole span of road that's being done. We are told by Surrey that the construction period should be about 100 days. So maybe 3.5 months, if my math is correct. The hospital expansion project, it's one of the projects that keeps us up at nights because we have been badly delayed this year because we asked a professional to provide us with some quantity surveys for the interior. We were promised that within a month. It has now been 6 months, and we can't get what we have paid for. And so we are looking now at some alternative options, and this occupied the cabinet just on Wednesday. We discussed this, and the responsible minister is making some efforts to get someone else to provide us with the quantities so that we can restart the work. That's what we've been waiting for. And so when we thought the delay this year would only have been a month or two, it has now turned into 6 months. So we are hopeful that we can get that done, and once we can get that done, we will be able to proceed. I just want to use this rostrum to say that oftentimes, Ms. Thompson, governments are severely criticized for not giving local people a chance. But a lot of times when you give local people a chance, we end up how we've ended up here. And don't get me wrong, because I will always say that the local person must be given the first chance. But unfortunately, we could have gone overseas from the start. We said, no, we're going to hire local professionals from St. Kitts to do this work for us. And he made a commitment that we'll have the work done so that we could proceed, and he has not delivered. And so here we are now, 6 months on, having to look for an alternative in order to move it forward. So it is not something that we are happy about, but it is something that we have to deal with, and I've said publicly, continue to say, that this is a significant investment. This investment in this hospital is a 40-year type of investment. When it's done, it will take healthcare for this little island in a quantum leap forward. And so while many have made hay about the fact that the project has taken a while, my purpose is to ensure that the project is done properly. And that is what we intend to do. Any other questions for me?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Elke Hewlett, Department of Information. I know it's supposed to be it's seen as a St. Kitts thing. It's the St. Kitts Music Festival. But can you speak to the economic impact of that event? And people might not look at it in the context of an impact in Nevis. So is there a knock-on effect for Nevis? Also, can you shed some light on some of the figures that you would have given earlier as it relates to the tax revenue, as to why there might have been an increase in the corporate tax and a decrease in the Social Security contributions, or money coming from Social Security? And the Brownhill Call Center, have they commenced operations, which is Radius? And if you can give an update on the smaller contact center that was looking at the other building on the same property. And has there been any movement on the airport expansion project? I think that's it for now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. You forced me to scribble because you asked me so many questions, so I'm trying my best to be able to get through so that I can answer those questions. Ms. Hewlett, thank you for your questions. The numbers, you asked the question, well, let me start where you started, Music Fest. I think that we need to appreciate that economic upturn in St. Kitts translates into economic upturn in the country. Economic upturn in Nevis translates into economic upturn in the country. I say that because Music Festival would not be what it is without the Nevisians going over and supporting. Culturama will not be what it is without the Kittitians come over and supporting. Carnival will not be what it is without the Nevisians going over. So we're going back and forth because we're one country. It's like somebody saying, oh, Music Fest is being held at Warner Park. Can it succeed without the people from Sandy Point and Keon and Keys and St. Paul's going to the Music Fest? The answer is no. Similarly, can it survive without the people from Nevis going? The answer is no. We are one country. And I think we need to reorient our thinking, because if we start to view these things through the proper prism, we understand that they bring value to the entire country. Let me tell you what happened, Ms. Hewlett. You had actual vehicles from Nevis, believe it or not, that were over in St. Kitts for the music festival as rentals, because St. Kitts, I'm told, ran out of rental vehicles. You had individuals who are transporting in luxury vehicles, the stars, Burna Boy and others. And I'm told that some luxury vans from Nevis also went over to St. Kitts to assist because they didn't have enough. The water taxis I mentioned are largely Nivision owned. And I spoke to the number of crossings over that weekend being 8,353. So it means that 8,353 persons went back and forth. Now, all of that translates into money in the economy. A lot of people who went over for Music Fest who came to St. Kitts for the Music Fest. I had some friends, for example, who were here from Anguilla. They came in on Friday, they went to the show Friday night, Saturday morning bright and early they headed to Nevis to spend the day in Nevis. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of other guests did the same thing. I'm aware that some people actually came in and stayed on Nevis and went to the music festival in St. Kitts. So your hotels, your restaurants, your taxi drivers, your car rental agencies, your water taxi operators, your ferry operators in town, everybody got a little bite out of this music festival pie. And that is why I don't get into debate sometimes where people say, oh, look how much money they pay Burna Boy. Oh, look how much money they pay Beres Hammond. Because these events, Music Fest, Culturama, Carnival, etc., can never expect on the size of our population to earn a profit at the gate. These events are designed to generate economic activity in the wider economy. And I am telling you, I was in St. Kitts over the weekend. It's a weekend that I always take with my family, Music Fest weekend, and hotels were full, car rental agencies were sold out, restaurants were bursting at the seams, people were everywhere. I went down on Port Zante and I saw so many people down there who went to buy liquor, they went to buy all kinds of things. They were spending in the local economy. In Nevis, in St. Kitts primarily, yes, because that's where the festival is, but also on Nevis. And so what I think, and I don't know if it was Mr. Bart who some time ago asked a question about can we measure some of these things. It would be good to get some way to quantify what it looks like so that people understand that if the festival itself costs, let us say $10 million US, sake of argument, just using a round figure. How much does that 10 million multiply into in terms of activity in the economy? How many people are employed? How many people are earning at the Marriott, at Park Hyatt? How many people are at the restaurants? How many people in the car rentals, etc.? I think that is important. And so for me, Ms. Hewlett, these events add tremendously to our economy, especially because these events come at the time when we're usually going into what we call the down season, the off season. We have a peak during winter, and then we tend to taper off. So these events are usually designed to fill up our hotels in June, July, August, those months when ordinarily the hotels will be empty. So I think that it has to be viewed in that wider context, and we must find a way. There have to be mechanisms out there to measure the impact. I think that is what we need to do. Taxes, you say, what would have accounted for the increased taxes? I think the corporate taxes, we had some payments from some companies that are doing business here. I think Digicel, Republic Bank. We have engaged now with some revenue sharing arrangements with St. Kitts in relation to entities. You know, that has been a perennial concern, that you have some big companies that are operating on both islands, but only paying tax on St. Kitts. And we've argued over that and said that is unfair because they're earning revenue and earning profits as well on the island of Nevis. So we're now working together in a collaborative way, Inland Revenue St. Kitts and Inland Revenue Nevis, to try and adjust some of these. So I think that has led to an uptick on the Nevis end in relation to some of these taxes. We're also seeing, I think, enhanced economic activity on the island. There's more activity on the island. I think people who are fair, looking at the island, see that there is greater economic activity. We now have, say, the Four Seasons, which is saying to us that they have good business into August. That is unprecedented. Unprecedented. In fact, the numbers that showed us they should be at about high 50-something% occupancy in August. Ordinarily, the hotels would be at 10%, maybe 12% if we're lucky during those months. So I think all of those are factors that have contributed. The number of small businesses that are opening, the level of activity that we're seeing in the economy generally, and of course the efficiency, because we are promoting now greater efficiency in terms of tax collection, particularly in our property taxes. We're saying that too many people are not paying anything, and we don't want to increase the rates of tax. So it is better that we spread whatever the taxes are across the widest cross-section of people. And a lot of people, for example, have built homes not paying any property tax because their homes are not yet registered. And so for years, and that is something, inefficiencies in the system that we're trying to work. I will tell you a private situation with me. I built a home in Montpelier 20 years ago. And maybe about 2, possibly 3 years after that house was not only built but lived in, I realized the tax bill was still saying $25 a year. And that was because they were charging me for what they call agricultural land. So the tax roster did not reflect that a home had already been built on this land. So we actually had to go in and say to the Inland Revenue, hey, there's a house there, you need to fix your records. Those things really shouldn't happen, because that house can't be built without planning permission. It can't be occupied without a certificate of occupation issued by planning. So the government knows that the house is there. Planning department is a arm of the government. But we still end up in a situation where the tax revenue department doesn't know that the house is there. So we need better coordination and better efficiency. And then, of course, in areas like the financial services, we're seeing quite an uptick. As I said, over 40, I think I mentioned 40% increase, 40.3% increase. I'm sorry, nope, forgive me, I need to be accurate in what I say, lest I be accused of trying to mislead, which is not a good thing. I will tell you that the numbers for financial services are up 79%. 79%. The tourism development levy is what was up 40.3%. So the efforts, I think, are bearing fruit, and we hope that they will continue. The Brownhill Call Center Radius, that's open. The last I checked, there were 36 employees, still trying to get up to 50. And it was interesting because I thought there would have been a flood of applications, but there has only really been a trickle. I suggest that the employment situation on the island is better than even the government would have thought, because we anticipate a lot of people, and that has not yet materialized. The other contact center, all that we need to do has been done. They have indicated that they will start shortly, and I'm hopeful that by the next time I come, I will be able to update on that. The last thing you asked me was about the airport expansion. I can say that we do not yet have anything to announce because we are still going through negotiations with landowners. The Honorable Alexis Jeffers is leading that project. He's working with the Honorable Eric Evelyn, the Minister of Lands. We're trying to get a reasonable price on the lands in the surrounding areas so that we can acquire those lands for purposes of the project. We have pretty much settled on the scope of the project. Once the design is done, we will then go to the public and have some consultations. I want to assure the press and the public that nothing is going to happen at the Van Zandvoort International Airport until we have involved the public in terms of consultation, so that they understand what is being done and they have an opportunity to make their own input in what we are proposing to do. The objective, again, is when we're done, is to be able to rehabilitate that airport, to accept more regional traffic, and hopefully to accept the jets that are coming out of Miami, the ones that are going into Anguilla and going into Dominica. I think American Eagle is who does those. These are smaller jets that carry about 90 to 110 passengers, that range. We are hopeful that we could attract those, and of course more private jet traffic. That is what we're seeking to do. not to compete with the RLB, but to complement the efforts at RLB, because we expect RLB will continue to have the long-haul flights from the UK, New York, where they're getting from New Jersey, etc. So we are hopeful that we will add, because as the tourism industry here grows, as the demand grows, part of the problem that we keep having is, of course, airlift. And so we welcome, and I want to go on record to commend the Honorable Marsha Henderson and her team for the announcement that JetBlue will start to fly in October, I believe, November. That is going to be very, very good for us, because it means that people have more options in terms of coming in, and our own people as well have more options in terms of travel. Any further questions for me?
Any developments in housing? Honestly, I didn't ask you.
You didn't ask me anything about housing.
I'm so sorry. Elke Hewlett, again, Department of Information. As it relates to housing, has there been any recent developments?
Housing, we continue to build out the various housing developments at Maddens. I'm told by Minister Evelyn, who's new Minister of Housing, he's very pleased, because in his own area now in Rice's village, they're going to be doing 8 homes there on a small development in Rice's. I think he said 4 have already broken ground, and we anticipate that another 2 will break ground shortly of the 8 that are planned. And so the housing revolution continues all across the island. I think the quality of the housing is very good. People can naturally see it for themselves. We have had very few complaints, even from those who occupy these homes. And of course, our model in Nevis has been different, because under this government we have said that we didn't have the capacity to build homes from the government coffers and then allow persons to inhabit those homes and pay monthly to the corporation. That was how Cherry Gardens was done, and that created a crisis for the Nevis Housing and Land Development Corporation, a financial crisis. It was easier for the homeowner, to be sure, because that homeowner is only paying $800, $600, whatever it is per month. But the corporation couldn't sustain that, because it means we have to come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars to build a house. And then the problem for the homeowner is that the homeowner never had a title for that house. So a lot of people say they have a house because they live in it, but they don't really have a house because the title is still with the corporation. So I think that we need to be mindful of that, because a lot of our people are really paying rent. Because if you want to know whether they have a house, let God forbid something were to happen and they were to pass away, the law is then going to ask, well, who's the owner of this property? And if you don't have your title, then you have nothing that you can leave to your children. So when we got into office, we said to persons who were paying the corporation that while you feel that you're doing better because you're paying a smaller sum to the corporation, we recommend that you go to the bank, you get the money, we offered a significant discount, and we said, come and pay off, get your title, and let the bank get a mortgage. And so you pay the bank. The good thing about paying the bank on a mortgage is as you pay, you get what is referred to as equity in your home. So let us say, for example, you borrowed $200,000 from the bank to build your home. You're paying off the bank as you go, but the property is also appreciating in value as you go. And what you find is after you've been paying for 10 years, you may have as much as $100,000 or so in equity in the property. That is now that you can go back to the bank and say, you know what, I need an extra $100,000 because my son Tommy is now going to university. That is, I think, how you really allow people to build wealth, as opposed to the system where you have of just putting a man in a house and telling him pay money every month. Some people were not paying, and when they paid sporadically, they still had no title. So in Nevis, we said instead of telling people on the political campaign, wave your keys, we said wave your title, because even people who are renting have keys. Wave your title, because ultimately it is a title to property that matters, not who's in it, but who has title to it. And so that is important for us. So we have taken a different approach where we invite persons to go to the bank, get a loan, and then we build the property at a heavily subsidized rates for those individuals. So that has been the model that we've used in all the developments that we've been embarking on since this government took office in This party took office, I'm sorry, in 2013.
On that same note, is the government, I know government has a challenge here where it doesn't own a lot of land. So is the government in the process of trying to identify any that it could purchase for housing?
The government is always trying to identify lands. But I will say publicly that we also encourage private individuals to develop lands as well. The fact that there's such a high demand for housing on the island suggests that there's a market for it. And we have in the past reached out to the larger companies like TDC and others to say to them, why not get into the housing market in Nevis as well? They have done developments in St. Kitts, Doors, I think Sunshine, something was it called, over in Frigate Bay. Sunrise, I think it's called. Various developments. Calypso Ridge or Calypso Edge or Ocean's Edge. I can't remember the names so well. But companies like TDC have done developments, and I have gone to them and I've invited them and said, listen, come, do something in Nevis, because the truth is that the government simply cannot keep up. And what we're finding is that there are a lot of young people, especially young professionals, who are at an income level where they can build a home, but they don't want the hassle. So a lot of people are coming to the government to say, I want a home, but the home is $800,000, because we don't want the hassle of having to go hire architect, contractor, dealer. So we prefer, and the government has said, no, that's not our business. That's not the business that we're in. So there's clearly a market for it. I recognize that some local investors tried to do something up here at Brazier's. Affluent Homes, I think it was called. I'm not sure how well that is doing, but that was a response to the request essentially for more people who have land to get into the development of that land, rather than what appears to be the case where everybody's calling government and saying, oh, I want to sell the government my land. All right? So the government is trying to buy land, but I feel that we need the private sector to play its part as well in satisfying the demands for housing that we have on the island currently. We have, of course, a tradition, a long historical tradition in Nevis of our people also owning land. So that's another thing, because a lot of young people have a piece of land that Granny gave them. And so how can they leverage that now to get a house on it? All of those are important indicators. And I think we're going to get it right. We're working through different models. We see St. Kitts has its own model over there. We have a slightly different model in Nevis. But I think we'll get it right. But we need the private sector also to step in and play its role. Any other questions for me? No? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It has been a little longer than we anticipated, but I'm happy that we were able to have this press conference today, the press conference for the month of June, and I look forward to seeing all of you again in the month of July. Thank you. God bless you.